Hey everyone, hey, welcome. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's stream. We're on Facebook Live right now. Uh, yeah, so welcome. I'm Axel T. Ernst from Get Speaking English. Hello if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. Also, hello if you are watching this afterwards on YouTube. Yeah, so just gonna settle in for a second, wait potentially for a couple of people to show up. Feel free to say hello in the chat if you are there. Last time I was really struggling with managing Facebook and everything at the same time because I don't have enough monitors. Anyways, I have it all sorted out today. I'm hoping it works okay. I'm using my tablet as a third monitor. So yeah, so I'll be able to see the comments and everything like that, I think, today without a lot of problem. Yeah, so I'm hoping it works out okay. So feel free to say hello. Yeah. So we've been talking about relationships for a couple of weeks now, all throughout my social media accounts. So, Instagram, Telegram, Facebook, YouTube. If you're looking for more information about this topic, feel free to check out those channels and those accounts for lots of different posts, vocabulary posts, videos, activities you can do to practice your speaking with. So lots of stuff there, speaking prompts. Yeah, and just general information as well to help you get speaking all about this topic, and useful things that will be helpful for your exams. This class in particular is going to be for students preparing for the B2 first exam and the C1 advanced exam. However, a lot of the phrases, a lot of the vocabulary, things that we're going to talk about will also be useful for an IELTS exam, for example, a TOEFL exam, any general English exam for upper intermediate advanced level. Also too, if you're just looking to speak English at an upper intermediate to an advanced level, potentially even a proficient level as well. So what we really want is just to be able to talk about a variety of different topics with the same level of detail that we would be able to in our native language, right? That's the ultimate goal here. So yeah. Okay. And today we are going to be looking specifically at the different phases of a romantic relationship. So before, I wasn't really honing in on romantic relationships. There are a lot of different kinds of relationships in our lives, not just romantic ones, but also with our friends, families, with our people in our neighborhood, all sorts of relationships, right? But today we're going to focus more on romantic relationships, and we're going to look at the different phases of those relationships. So we're going to do a bit of a warm-up activity there to help us get thinking about those phases. And then we're going to look at a part 3 task similar to one that you will get on the B2 first or the C1 advanced exam. So we're going to look at the task together. We can brainstorm some potential answers for that task. And then afterwards, as always, I will take this video, I will take the notes, I will compile everything together, and I will upload it onto YouTube so we have another fantastic resource that we can all learn from afterwards. All right. So let's go. So I thought as a warm-up activity, let's just think about the different phases of a romantic relationship, right? And feel free to throw out your ideas in the chat as well. So whatever your ideas are, I can add them to our notes, and then at the end we will have everything in one place for everyone to learn from together. And I was brainstorming about this as well, obviously. And I think one of the biggest steps, I mean, obviously you would meet each other, right? But I think going from just dating to exclusivity is kind of a very big, important moment, right? And like, what is that? Just dating versus exclusivity. Well, if you're dating people, you could potentially be dating multiple people at the same time, right? Especially nowadays when we have lots of apps and things like that. It's very common to casually see a couple people at the same time before you decide who specifically you want to focus on. So when we're just dating, maybe we're seeing multiple people. But if we are exclusive, we say that we want to commit to just one person. So exclusivity is that state where you're seeing only one person. And then if we say that we are exclusive, if our relationship is exclusive, it means that we are only seeing each other. We are not seeing other people romantically. So you're only focused on one person. So typically at some point in your relationship, you would agree to see each other exclusively. Yeah, so exactly. So that's definitely one really big step, right? At this point too, also, right? Once you are exclusive, once you've decided to see each other exclusively, you might become a boyfriend and girlfriend. So boyfriend for a male in a relationship, like people who identify as male, girlfriend for people who identify as female, right? So you could say that. Or we also have some gender neutral language as well, that I'm going to throw out here. Because I'm not crazy about using the terms boyfriend and girlfriend when I'm seeing people. To me, sounds a little immature. So, but partner is a great alternative. So, this is my partner. So no gender there at all. We might also refer to, like, if it's a very serious relationship, we might refer to them as our significant other. So both of these are great neutral ways we can refer to the people who we are seeing. We could also use these labels as well for, like, in a marriage, for example, or something like that. So boyfriend and girlfriend is really just for when you're dating, whereas these we can use in other stages of the relationship as well. Yeah. So that's definitely sort of an important moment, going from just dating to exclusivity. I would say that another really important part, like another important phase, might just be saying saying I love you, right? So, and I know in English we use the word love in a variety of different contexts, right? And I know that, in other languages they might have different words for, when you really like something versus when the love you share for a child or a family versus the love that you would share with a partner, right? I know in English we just say I love everything. But, still telling your partner that you love them is a very significant moment, typically, right? So this is a moment when we're going to share that, we have deep affection, that we really care for someone in our lives, right? And, it's just a way of letting someone know that we have strong feelings for them. So if we have strong feelings for someone, it means that you really care about them a lot, you really appreciate them a lot. So if we have strong feelings for somebody, it means that we really, really, really like them a lot. So that's another great phase in a romantic relationship. Another kind of important one, and I'm hoping this doesn't get me in trouble, but making love, right? Like being intimate with someone. So, and in this context, actually being physically intimate with somebody. So basically, to have like a sexual relationship with someone could be intercourse. So sexual intercourse, that would be the very official word for it. But it could also be other sexual activities as well, right? So, and it just, a moment of sharing physical and emotional closeness to one another, right? So that's definitely a very significant moment in a relationship as well, right? Yeah. Aside from that as well, I would say maybe meeting the friends and family of your significant other, right? That's usually a pretty important moment. If you don't know each other's families already or friends, right? So it can be very, very important, that moment when you're introducing your partner to the other important people in your life, right? So the people that you are closest with, right? You might bring them in and you might introduce them to your circle of friends. So your circle of friends, those are like basically the people you hang out with most often. So that might be really important, right? Yeah, and it's also pretty common to introduce your partner to your immediate family. So what do I mean by the immediate family? That's kind of like your closest relatives. So your parents, for example, your siblings. So siblings, gender neutral word for brothers and sisters. Maybe also your children as well, if you are older and you have children, maybe from a previous relationship. So you might also want to introduce them to your children as well. So yeah, so that would be definitely really important, in introducing them to your immediate family, right? As well, too. Getting engaged. So to get engaged, definitely a really significant step in a romantic relationship, right? It's when you make that's when you make a formal commitment to marry the other person, right? So often getting engaged involves what we would call a proposal. So there is a proposal that happens. So oftentimes, not always, but usually it is the man in the relationship that initiates. Not always, right? But it's common, at least in Western societies, that the man gets down on one knee and proposes. And usually at that time, it's common for them to give their partner an engagement ring. So the engagement ring, it's like a little piece of jewelry that would signify that they're gonna go ahead, you're gonna get married, and your relationship is very, very serious, essentially. And from this point on, you're no longer, your boyfriend and girlfriend, but we would technically call people who are engaged, we call them fiancés. So a fiancé, and there's two different spellings. One for male here, you can see it has like an E. Fiancé has double E. Now, I will say that because obviously English is very gender neutral, this is coming from French, so it's not gender neutral, but there is a trend to just use fiancé without the second E in both situations. So yeah, so it's very common to just spell fiancé with one E, and both the pronunciations for these words are the same. So fiance, my male fiance, my female fiance. The pronunciation does not change. Yeah, so you will be fiancés once you've been engaged. So that's what happens. And then obviously the final step, right, would be getting married, right? And so I think we all know that when you get married, this is when you make your official lifelong commitment to one another, right? And usually this happens during a formal ceremony, right? So ceremony, a very fancy event with different things happening. The ceremony is called a wedding, right? So you would have usually it's very common for people to have some sort of wedding. That might happen. Not everybody though. Some people choose to get married in secret. And that means to get elope, so they will elope instead of getting married. So maybe they won't have like they won't have a big wedding or anything like that, but maybe they will just go to a courthouse, for example, and get married, or maybe they will go someplace and just have a small private ceremony without a lot of people, without having the big ceremony, having the big wedding. Yeah. So we would call that to elope in that situation. So yeah, so if you want to avoid having the ceremony, you would just elope instead, right? And of course, lots of other ideas. Feel free to add your ideas in the chat as well. I mean, there could also be like, I don't know, taking your first trip together. I mean, I think that might be pretty significant, maybe. Maybe moving in together, so sharing maybe an apartment or a home or something like that, right? That's usually a pretty significant step in a relationship. Maybe buying your first home, having a baby. I mean, lots of other firsts that happen in a relationship, right? So yeah, and I'm sure you can think of others as well. Yeah. So let's look at a task. So I have a task that is based on this idea. So for those of you who don't know, so during the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam, you take the exam with another candidate. So there's usually one other candidate in the room, or maybe potentially two other candidates in the room. And during this part of the exam, you actually have to do an interactive activity. So here, what happens is that you will get this sheet of paper, and it kind of has a web. There's like a question in the middle. And then there's always a couple points, usually like 5 points around that are connected to this question. And the idea is that you're supposed to answer the question in the middle while reflecting on the different points on the piece of paper. And it's essentially you just use this piece of paper to guide the conversation with your partner. So you will talk about these points with your partner for 2 minutes. And then afterwards, the examiner will ask you a follow-up question as well. So you will talk for another minute. And usually at that point, they ask you to try to come to an agreement on something. But yeah, at this point, you're just talking about the question and the different points. So yeah. So you get the piece of paper, and the examiner usually says like a quick little dialogue, just summarizing what's on the paper. So here are some events that could have a significant impact on a romantic relationship and a question for you both to discuss. And so first you have some time to look at the task. And so you don't have a lot of time here to look at the task. You have about 15 seconds just to read the information. And then once the examiner tells you, you'll begin your conversation. So here in this case, they might say, now talk to each other about how these events might change a romantic relationship. And then that's your indicator to talk about the task. Yeah, so it's really just a conversation. It's not that complicated. Don't worry about it too much. A couple little points though. Just like we always want to be adding things to the conversation. We don't want to be repeating things over and over and over again. So do try to be original, try to bring something new to the conversation when you are talking. So that's probably very important point number 1. Second point, it's not a monologue, it's a conversation. So we don't want to try to dominate the conversation. We don't want to spend all of our time talking. I know it might be tempting to just try to talk because you want to show off your ability to talk. However, we're actually getting marked on our ability to participate equally in a conversation. So if you dominate the conversation, that's actually going to be bad. So instead, it's better to sort of have a shorter contribution and then potentially ask a follow-up question or something to your partner just to show that you can initiate a conversation, guide a conversation, and participate in one. So you can ask your partner to agree, or you can ask for their opinion about something, you can ask your partner questions about the topics. Anything just to get the conversation moving and have a nice little chat, right? Another little detail here as well. I know that there are 5 points on this task. However, you do not have to talk about every single point, okay? That is not the point of this conversation is not to talk about every single one of these points. It's to have a conversation. Maybe that conversation is just focusing on one point and just talking about various sub-points underneath that, right? I mean, if we're talking about having a baby, for example, I mean, this could change a relationship in a number of different ways, right? So there are lots of various ways you can talk about this subject while still staying on task and completing the assignment, right? So don't feel like you have to rush to touch on every single point. Don't worry about it. As long as the conversation just keeps moving, just keeps evolving, and new things are being added, you do not have to talk about every single thing on this piece of paper, right? So again, just focus on having really good conversation. Also, too, don't worry as well about having an intelligent conversation, I'm going to say. Some people get really stressed out when it comes to these exams because they think that they have to come off as sounding incredibly intelligent and incredibly well-read on the topics and things like that. It's not an academic presentation, nothing like that. It's not even a formal interview, really. If you just keep in your mind that this is a casual conversation, like a casual conversation you might have with a stranger on the street or with a friend, you'll absolutely be fine. So all of the topics are things that generally everybody will have some sort of opinion on, and usually the topics that are suggested are general enough that everybody will have something to say. So don't worry about sounding brilliant or anything like that. Just aim for having a really good chat, really good friendly chat about these topics. Okay? All right. So let's look at this together then. So the question, right. So the question is, how might these events change a romantic relationship? And we have a couple different options here. So we have first major disagreement, moving in together, getting married, buying a house, and having a baby. So just for time, I think I'm just going to focus on 2 or 3 of these. And then I encourage you, if you're watching this afterwards, or if you have some time later, just to go, you could grab a partner, practice discussing this with them, or you can also just practice talking about these points to yourself as well. So I encourage you to do that. So, but I think I'm going to talk about maybe this one, the first disagreement, moving in together, and then I think I'll do getting married. And there we go. Yeah, so obviously, I feel like this task, like the way that it's phrased, we could almost think about this as like, as a pro and con situation, right? Because these events could either change a relationship in a positive way, or they could change a relationship in a negative way, right? So, yeah. So, for example, like the first disagreement. Obviously, first major disagreement could definitely change your relationship for better or worse, right? So, as in, to change something for better or worse, great collocation there, just basically meaning it can either be a good change or it could be a bad change, right? So, it would definitely test a couple's ability to resolve conflict, right? Right? So, to resolve a conflict, another great collocation there, just basically to come to, just to basically not be in a conflict anymore, to solve the issue, basically, right? So if it goes well, it could maybe strengthen their ability to problem solve in the future. However, too, if it goes really bad, maybe it can signal some red flags with, your partner. So what is a red flag? We talk about red flags sometimes. I mean, you'll hear red flags talked about in a variety of situations, but it comes up a lot when we're talking about partners. It's like, oh, there's a lot of red flags with that guy, right? Basically, a red flag is like, it's like a signal that something is a huge problem. So something that's a big problem. It's basically like a signal of danger. Right? So here in this case, if there are some red flags with your partner, it means that maybe there is some sort of problem with them. Maybe you might want to end the relationship just because the red flags, just there's really big issues, and you should maybe not stay with this person, right? So yeah, so if the first major disagreement goes really bad, that could definitely raise a red flag that maybe this person is not going to be good to stay with for the long term, right? Yeah, so that could be something. You'd also learn a lot about each other's communication styles, right? So, for example, communication styles. So, for example, some people might... So how would it change a romantic relationship? It's like, well, some people you would learn about your communication styles, right? Some people might be really good at communicating their needs. So that would be positive. That would be a green flag if somebody's really good at communicating their needs. That would be a green flag. So that they would probably be good to work with in the future. Whereas other people may not be really good communicators, right? Some people may reveal that they are actually maybe like we would call really avoidant. some people just love to avoid talking about problems, right? They really avoid conflict, right? And it could be really hard to solve a problem with somebody who wants to avoid conflict, right? So it could change the relationship in that way, right? If it might cause tension, it might cause tension and uncertainty if you're not able to resolve the conflict through communication, right? So that could be really rough, especially if it does ends up creating some tension and uncertainty, right? So, so some potential issues there, right? And feel free to throw your ideas in the chat if you have any, right? So in this case too, if somebody reveals that they are a bit avoidant, maybe the couple will have to maybe like learn how to address the issues head on. We say to address an issue head on, as in, you just have to get in there, do the work, without tiptoeing around things or avoiding things. So if you address the problem head on, that means that you just like suck it up and do it, without avoiding it, right? So so that could be something, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe couples therapy is in the future, something like that, right? I think another thing too, right? Like, it would also make you aware of things that are triggering, right? Or sensitive, so something that triggers you. It's just basically something that sort of gets on your nerves and it causes you to have an emotional reaction. So potentially like that, or, if you're sensitive to something, those are kind of delicate topics. So, I think everybody has sort of like certain buttons that they don't like to have pushed, right? So that would definitely reveal that, right? And then maybe the relationship would change depending on how to, react to those topics, right? Like, again, do you want to stay with this person or do you want to not stay with this person? So it definitely could potentially highlight some issues with your person of choice, right? So lots of different things, right? So of course, obviously, on the positive side, if you can move through it, maybe a relationship will be stronger, right? Oh, I can't type. Right? Maybe it'll lead to maybe a stronger sense of trust and more understanding of one another, right? But again, too, right? If you're unable to solve the problems because maybe somebody is just bad at communicating their needs, or they're avoiding, or maybe they get really aggressive and you're not able to talk with them, then, maybe that will cause some issues, right? If things aren't resolved, that could eventually lead to resentment, all sorts of things, right? So unresolved issues could turn into resentment. And I think I talked about this word last time, but it's basically the sort of like this feeling of like anger and frustration and hostility that kind of just gets in you because you feel like you've been wronged in some way. So it could definitely lead to that, right? Yeah. On a more positive note, let's talk about moving in together. And again, feel free to throw out your ideas if you have an idea. On Obviously, moving in with another person means that you will spend more time together, right? So, right? So, spend a lot more time together. That could either be a good or a bad thing, right? On one hand, maybe you would spend more time. Like, you would have to basically share your daily routines, right? You might also be able to share certain chores or obligations, like, for example, sharing, chores, cooking duties, right? You might also end up spending your off time together, for example, maybe watching TV, right? So that could be kind of like something interesting. Yeah, like it would definitely test your compatibility with someone, right? And what is compatibility? So compatibility is basically how well you are able to work and live with somebody else, right? So yeah, so you know, uh, some people will find out when they move in together that they work really well together, that they are very compatible, that they have habits and they have sort of daily routines and values that align with one another. Whereas other people will find out that your lives are too different from one another and that it's really, really, really challenging to coexist, right? So that could definitely be something. Yeah, so if it's hard for you to coexist with one another, that means that it's hard for you to live together in the same space. So to coexist basically means to live together or be together in the same space. Right? Yeah, so definitely it's a moment to figure out if your lifestyles and your habits complement each other, right? So, and if they complement each other, it means that, you know, they go nicely together. Maybe the one thing makes the other thing even better somehow, right? So typically, if two things complement each other, they fit together and they make each other thing better in one way or the other. Yeah, so lots of different things here, right? It would definitely also be like an opportunity to learn about habits, preferences, also quirks, right? And so a quirk is a kind of a funny word. So a quirk is basically, it's kind of like an unusual habit or a personality trait that your partner, that people, I mean, we all have quirks. We all have little things that we do that are a bit odd. So, if you learn together, if you move in together, you would definitely find out your partner's quirks, the little sort of personality traits or things that they do that might be considered a little bit odd, right? And that could be a good or bad thing, depending on what that quirk is, right? I think it's really common for sometimes when you first meet somebody, you love their quirks, think it's really cute, but then maybe later on it turns into an annoyance, right? So maybe quirks turn into an annoyance. Or maybe you just, I don't know, you love your partner more because of their weird quirks, right? I mean, it could go either way, right? Definitely. So, yeah, definitely an issue. I mean, there's also shared responsibilities as well, right? You would have to like figure out, who's going to do the cooking, the cleaning, that sort of thing, and negotiate those situations, right? So depending on, whether that goes good or bad can really change a relationship. So, right? So maybe you discover that you are able to equally share the responsibilities, right? Or, right, maybe it can create conflict if someone feels like they have become a caretaker, right? So a caretaker, obviously, I mean, that's more like a parent role, for example. So somebody might feel that they're always cleaning up after cooking for taking care of the other person. And that can end up being kind of a really, like a negative impact on the relationship, right? So there's absolutely that as well. We can also talk about money here, right? So lots of things, right? You're obviously, if you're living together, you have to share living expenses, right? So share living expenses. And what are the living expenses? So the living expenses is basically just like a catch-all word for not just bills, but also like groceries, maybe toiletries, things like cleaning supplies, things you need, right? Yeah, so you would have to share living expenses, also rent, right? So rent is like that monthly payment that you would make if you are renting an apartment. It's called a mortgage if you have a house, if you own a house, so you pay a mortgage to the bank to pay off that loan. Yeah, and so this as well too, right? Like this could go really good or this could go really bad. Like on one hand, you could find out if you are good at maybe budgeting and negotiating expenses, right? So that could be really great. Or maybe you find out that your partner is really bad with money, right? Maybe they're very irresponsible with their finances. So that could be something as well, right? Like you would find out very, very quickly, I think, if somebody is able to pay their bills on time, or maybe they take out a lot of debt and things like that. Yeah, definitely some ideas there. Yeah, and then finally, let's talk about getting married. Another really big, important thing, right? So, and I think this would change a relationship a lot, right? I mean, it definitely solidifies the commitment, right? Right? You're legally bound, right? And what does it mean to be legally bound to somebody? If you were legally bound to somebody, you are basically legally attached or tied to somebody. And I keep saying legally because it's under the eyes of the law, right? So there's more legal obligations and things like that, right? When you are officially married to somebody, makes things a little bit more complicated. I mean, on one hand, it could be really good because it might give you a sense of security, right? So I mean, that could be like a positive thing, right? Like, maybe the partners will feel a sense of security because it's really hard to end a marriage, right? So that could definitely be something. Yeah, maybe also too, right? They would like stick through challenges, right? So when things get tough, right, it's not as easy to leave your partner. So that could potentially be something, right? Yeah. Also, too, right? Like you would have to like merge your finances. So what does it mean to merge something? To merge something means to like put it together, basically. So for example, it might be really common for a couple to open up a joint bank account, right? And you might also have to make joint decisions on financial matters, right? So a joint bank account, that's just a way to say a shared bank account. And again, here too, I've used joint decisions. So a collective decisions, you would have to make joint decisions about how to spend money, maybe how to do your investments, things like that, right? So, and this also too could lead to like a really good or bad thing, right? You would also have to create budgets together, right? But on one hand, maybe couples could pool their resources together, right? So if you pool your resources, that means that you put your resources together, and then you could use those resources, that collective mass of resources, to maybe make really large purchases, right? So that could be really positive. So maybe you could pool your resources together and then go ahead and buy a house, right? And that is something that would be hard to do otherwise. So that could definitely be a positive thing. It could change the relationship in a very positive way, right? Another positive too, right? Like maybe somebody, maybe if one partner comes from a poorer background and they marry somebody with a bit more money, maybe they will feel a bit better off, right? So that could make their lives a little bit easier. That could be definitely a positive thing. Or maybe it could create a lot of conflict, right? Again, going back to the idea that, maybe somebody's really bad with money, so maybe that somebody could spend too much money, right? Somebody could spend too much money, or maybe they are irresponsible with money as well. And also too, like maybe maybe one partner accumulates a lot of debt, right? Which is a huge problem because you're legally tied, both people are responsible for that debt, right? So that could be that could be like a real bad thing, right? Yeah, maybe you find out one partner accumulates a lot of debt, yeah, which takes a negative toll on the relationship. Yeah, so I made lots of different things that we could think about. All of these ideas definitely have some good, like, ways that they could change a relationship in a good way, ways they could change a relationship in a really bad way, right? So, or also just like, how they, maybe what's happening in the relationship and things like that, right? Yeah, so lots of different ideas. Feel free to take this task and think about it yourself. Maybe you spin it in a little bit of a different way that I've spinned it as well, right? So lots of ways that we can kind of talk about this. Again, the point of the activity is just to have a conversation, kind of brainstorm with your partner, throw out ideas and whatnot, and just have like sort of a chat about these topics. And then, like I said, like the follow-up question, usually what they do is they usually ask you to come to an agreement about something. And you don't have to come to an agreement, you just have to try to come to an agreement. So again, the point is to have a good conversation, not to actually, solve any major problems or anything like that in the world, nothing like that. But just to try to have a conversation so that you're able to negotiate things of that nature. Yeah. All right. So that is it for today. As I said, I'm going to take this video and I will take these notes. I will put everything together and I will upload everything onto YouTube. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming out. As always. Yeah, and like I mentioned too, like there's a lot of other posts and information about relationships right now that you can check out. There's going to be one more live lesson next week. So it's going to be about part 4 of the speaking paper, the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So that's going to be happening next Thursday, 1300 UTC. Yeah, and then the topic after that is going to be sustainability, which should be an interesting one, I think. Yeah. All right. Anyways, thank you so much again for coming out. And I will see you all next time. All right, bye.